LiSTNR production.
In the dead of night, Friday, October 15, 2021, on the rugged coastline of Western Australia, a 4-year-old girl is abducted from a tent at a campsite. Her disappearance sparked a massive police search and captured the nation's attention with round-the-clock media coverage. The child was found 18 days later in what was one of Australia's most successful police operations. Who abducted her and why? I'm Dan Mullins. This is Crime Insider's Judgment, a deep dive on a judge's final verdict of a crime and what transpired to incite that judgment. On October 15, 2021, Cleo Smith and Jake Glidden, a young couple from Carnarvon, Western Australia, arrived at the Blowholes campsite approximately 70 kilometres north of their hometown. They were accompanied by their 4-year-old daughter Cleo Smith and their infant daughter. The campsite, located near a rugged coastline where the Indian Ocean meets steep cliffs, was a popular spot for families seeking a weekend escape. That evening, Ellie and Jake set up their family tent, and Cleo was put to bed in a red sleeping bag alongside her sister in a portable cot. The family went to sleep around 8 p.m. with the tent securely zipped. In the early hours of October 16, between 1:30 a.m. and 6 a.m., Terence Darrell Kelly, a 37-year-old Carnarvon resident, approached the Smiths' tent. Kelly, who lived alone at 7 Tonkin Crescent in Carnarvon, was under the influence of methamphetamine. He unzipped the tent, entered, and removed Cleo, still in her sleeping bag, without waking the family. He placed her in his white Holden Captiva and drove back to Carnarvon, where he kept her in a locked bedroom in his home. The room was decorated with cartoon characters, and Kelly provided Cleo with food and toys during her captivity. At approximately 6 a.m. on October 16, Ellie woke to find the tent's zipper open and Cleo missing. She immediately alerted Jake, and the couple searched the campsite, calling Cleo's name. Finding no trace of her, they contacted the Western Australian Police, who arrived within hours. The police noted the absence of physical evidence at the scene, such as footprints or signs of a struggle, likely due to the windy conditions and sandy terrain. Detective Superintendent Rod Wild was assigned to lead the investigation, named Task Force Rodea, which involved over 100 officers as well as drones, helicopters, and marine units. The search covered the Blowholes area surrounding bushland and coastal waters. Ellie and Jake made public appeals through social media and press conferences, urging anyone with information to come forward. Ellie's posts on Facebook included a plea stating, "Someone has taken our little girl. Please help us find her." Those posts gained widespread attention, shared thousands of times. The case drew national and international media coverage, with comparisons to high-profile missing child cases like Madeleine McCann in Europe. The Western Australian government offered a $1 million reward for information leading to Cleo's recovery. In Carnarvon, a town of about 5,000 people, community members organised search parties, distributed posters with Cleo's photo, and held vigils. Meanwhile, Terence Kelly, who had access to social media, sent a friend request to Ellie on Facebook, monitoring her posts without interacting. During the 18 days Cleo was missing, Kelly kept her in his Tonkin Crescent home, approximately 3 kilometres from the Smith's residence. He occasionally left her alone to attend a course or shop for supplies, including children's items. Police later found evidence that Kelly had been active on social media, posting about his fictitious children and maintaining a collection of Bratz dolls, which he treated as his own. The investigation intensified as Task Force Rhodia analysed phone tower data, CCTV footage, and witness statements, narrowing down potential suspects in the Carnarvon area. Task Force Rhodia, led by Detective Superintendent Rod Wild, operated around the clock to find Cleo Smith. The investigation faced challenges due to the lack of physical evidence at the Blowhole's campsite. The remote location, combined with strong winds and tidal movements, erased potential clues like tyre tracks or footprints. Police conducted extensive searches, deploying ground teams to comb the outback, marine units to patrol the coastline, and drones to survey inaccessible areas. Community volunteers joined the effort, searching shacks, dunes, and nearby roads, while the public shared Cleo's image widely. The breakthrough came from forensic analysis of phone tower data and CCTV footage. Investigators identified a white Holden Captiva detected near the blowholes around 3 a.m. on October 16. The vehicle was registered to Terence Darrell Kelly, a 37-year-old Carnarvon resident with no prior criminal record. Further analysis showed Kelly's phone had connected to a tower near the campsite at the time of the abduction. CCTV footage from Carnarvon captured his car moving erratically in the days following, raising suspicions. Police also noted Kelly's unusual social media activity, including his friend request to LiSTNR and posts about his children, despite living alone. On the 2nd of November 2021, Task Force Rhodia obtained a warrant to search Kelly's home at 7 Tonkin Crescent. At 1 a.m. the following day, a team led by Detective Senior Sergeant Cameron Blaine executed the raid. Inside, police found a cluttered house with a large collection of Bratz dolls, children's clothes and toys, consistent with Kelly's documented behaviour of treating dolls as his family. In a locked bedroom, they found Cleo Smith, alive and physically unharmed, sitting on a mattress with a toy car. The moment was recorded on police body cameras.
I got it. Hey, Bobby. Come here. I got you, Bobby.
What's your name?
You're all right.
What's your name? What's your name, sweetheart?
My name is Cleo.
Your name is
You're all right,
Cleo.
Bobby.
Hello, Cleo.
Blaine radioed back, "We've got her." Cleo was immediately taken to Carnarvon Hospital for evaluation, where she was reunited with Ellie and Jake. Medical examinations confirmed she was in good health, though she showed signs of emotional distress from her 18-day ordeal. Ellie and Jack issued a statement thanking the police and community. "Our family is whole again," it said. The rescue made global headlines, with news outlets praising the police effort and community support. The $1 million reward was not claimed, as the breakthrough came from police work. Here's Detective Senior Sergeant Blaine, who led the raid on Kelly's house, at a press conference on the day of the rescue. He tells reporters about making the call to tell Cleo's parents she was alive and well.
You can imagine, just absolute surprise, and they were ecstatic. So things developed so quickly. You know, we didn't really have time to prepare them, and certainly didn't want to give them any false expectations about what might happen. We didn't know ourselves, so you know, it's always a delicate process, you know, when it comes to that. But still, to be able to give them that news and then say, please start making your way to the hospital, we'll meet you there, it was fantastic. And, an honour and to witness that reunion in terms of recording evidence from people so young. We also need to be mindful of their mental health and their welfare. So the questions that it was more or less that we were talking to her than she was talking to us. But can I say, having seen her a couple of times this morning, she's a little Energizer bunny, and how she has that much energy, I wish I did. I'm about ready to go to sleep. But she was very, very sweet, energetic girl, very trusting and very open with us. We all wanted to take turns in holding her. It was a really good experience.
Kelly was arrested at his home and taken into custody. During interrogation, he admitted to abducting Cleo, stating he took her to be his daughter. He admitted burning the onesie, underwear and sleeping bag that Cleo was taken in. Kelly said in his police interview that Cleo had cried when left alone, and he had turned the volume up on a radio to drown out her voice. She heard her name on the radio and told Kelly, "They're saying my name." Kelly also told police he had, quote, roughed her up a few times and smacked her. He described Cleo as being bossy and asking for chocolate. He conceded he smacked her, but said he did not want to hurt her badly. Kelly also said in that interview that he had tried to tie up Cleo's hands, feet, and mouth using sticky tape to try to tie her to a chair. He told police he wasn't able to secure her because, quote, she was a bit of a fighter. Police confirmed Kelly acted alone, and his actions were influenced by chronic methamphetamine use. A search of his home revealed evidence of his fixation on dolls, including social media posts where he referred to them as his children. Kelly's background included a traumatic childhood marked by maternal abandonment, foster care, and possible fetal alcohol syndrome, which later informed his legal defense. The investigation revealed Kelly had kept Cleo in a modified bedroom, locked with a deadbolt, and provided her with basic necessities. The community of Carnarvon, while relieved, grappled with shock that the perpetrator was a local resident. Task Force Rodea was abandoned after the rescue, with Detective Superintendent Wild commending his team's diligence. The case highlighted the effectiveness of data-driven policing, particularly the use of phone tower records. Coming up, Kelly's trial and the impact of what's called Verdin's principles. On January 24, 2022, Terence Darrell Kelly appeared in the Carnarvon Magistrates Court via video link and pleaded guilty to one count of child stealing. His case was transferred to the District Court of Western Australia in Perth for sentencing. On April 5, 2023, Chief Judge Julie Wager presided over the sentencing hearing. The prosecution outlined the details of the abduction. Kelly, under the influence of methamphetamine, had driven to the blowholes, unzipped the Smiths' tent, and taken Cleo, holding her for 18 days. The court heard that Cleo suffered emotional trauma, though she was physically unharmed. Cleo's mother, Ellie Smith, provided a victim statement read in court. It said, "Our family has been broken. Cleo's trust and sense of safety have been damaged, and we live with constant fear." The statement underscored the lasting impact on Cleo and her parents, who attended regular counselling sessions. The prosecution at trial emphasised the crime's severity, noting the national distress it caused and the extensive police resources deployed. Kelly's defence presented evidence of his mental health issues, supported by psychological and psychiatric reports. These reports detailed his severe personality disorders, chronic methamphetamine addiction, and a traumatic childhood involving abandonment, foster care, and possible fetal alcohol syndrome. Dr. Rajan Darji, a consultant forensic psychiatrist, gave evidence at the trial. The judgment from Justice Wager reads, Dr. Darji identified the following features of Kelly's conditions that facilitated his offending: an inability to relate to and be intimate with others, not being able to see things from other people's perspective, becoming fixated on things, being emotionally and socially withdrawn and detached, being suspicious and fearful of others, having a severely disturbed identity, low self-esteem, grandiose and idealized fantasies, severely compromised reality testing, inability to regulate his emotions, and struggling to deal with feelings of dysphoria and psychological pain. Dr. Darji explained that these factors impaired Kelly's judgment and diminished his capacity to make healthy decisions, think rationally, and understand the wrongfulness of his actions. While in his police interview, Kelly did speak of having done something wrong. Dr. Darji explained that this is different from appreciating the wrongfulness of his actions. What is said after the fact is not necessarily indicative of an individual's mental state at the time of the behaviour. The defence argued that Kelly's actions were influenced by a delusional belief system evidenced by his collection of Bratz dolls and social media posts about fictitious children. They submitted that his mental impairments reduced his moral culpability and warranted a lenient sentence. The court considered the Verdin's Principles, a set of 6 guidelines established in the 2007 Victorian Court of Appeal case, the Crown versus Verdin's, which are applied across Australian jurisdictions, including Western Australia. The principles outline how a mental impairment, short of insanity, may affect sentencing. The first principle: the impairment may reduce the offender's moral culpability, as it can impair judgment or impulse control. The second principle: the mental impairment may lessen the need for general deterrence, as the offender's condition makes them a poor example for others. The third principle: it may reduce the need for specific deterrence, as the offender may not respond to punishment typically. The fourth principle is the impairment may make imprisonment more burdensome due to mental health challenges. The fifth principle is that the offender's mental impairment may increase the risk of offending, requiring a balance with mitigating factors. And the sixth principle: it may affect the offender's ability to engage in rehabilitation programs. Kelly's defense argued that his personality disorders and drug-induced state met these criteria, particularly in reducing his culpability and increasing the hardship of imprisonment. However, the prosecution countered that his voluntary methamphetamine use was what's called a prior fault, limiting the application of Verdin's Principles, as courts often view self-induced intoxication as an aggravating factor. Judge Julie Wager sentenced Kelly to 13 years and 6 months imprisonment with a non-parole period of 11 years and 6 months, backdated to the 3rd of November 2021. The judge acknowledged Kelly's early guilty plea and mental health issues and told the court, "Your traumatic background and disorders are mitigating factors, but the seriousness of the offence and its impact on the victim demand a significant penalty." The sentence reflected a balance between the Verdin's Principles and the need to protect the public and address the harm to Cleo and her family. There was another complicated principle that was a central consideration in this case: the bug me principle. It was a major subject of argument at the sentencing of Terence Kelly, and it was also a significant point of contention in his subsequent appeal against the severity of his sentence. Here's how it's applied. Firstly, in relation to Kelly's background and deprivation. During the sentencing, Kelly's defense presented evidence of a significantly deprived and traumatic childhood. This included details of severe neglect, abuse, and a lack of proper care and nurturing during his formative years. The court heard that he had grown up in an isolated environment, experienced intergenerational trauma, and had significant developmental disadvantages. His social isolation was also noted, particularly his lack of meaningful adult relationships. There was also what's called impact on moral culpability. Chief Judge Wager, in her sentencing remarks, acknowledged that the Bug-Me principle directs judges to consider how such a history can reduce an offender's moral culpability. It doesn't excuse the crime, but it helps explain the offender's journey and their diminished capacity for sound judgment or to conform to societal norms. It was argued, and accepted to a degree by the sentencing judge, that Kelly's background, coupled with his cognitive impairments, he was assessed as having an intellectual disability and a history of mental health issues, contributed to his distorted perception of reality and his inability to understand the full gravity of his actions or the impact on Cleo. His idealized fantasy world was also linked to his developmental and social deficits stemming from his background. And finally, there was what's called sentencing mitigation. The application of the Bug-Me principle, along with his early guilty plea, served as a mitigating factor in Kelly's sentence. While the judge still imposed a substantial custodial sentence of 13 years and 6 months, the mitigating factors stemming from his background likely prevented an even longer term that might have been handed down to an offender without such a history. The judge had to balance the need for community protection and general deterrence against the reduced moral culpability arising from his deprived upbringing. We'll assess how the Bug-Me principle impacted the appeal later, but in essence, the Bug-Me principle meant that Kelly's deeply troubled background was a recognized and relevant factor in his sentencing, helping to explain aspects of his behavior and ultimately influencing the length of his prison term, even for such a heinous crime. In February 2024, Kelly's legal team appealed the sentence to the Western Australian Court of Appeal, arguing it was manifestly excessive given his mental impairments and childhood trauma. Kelly's lawyers argued 4 grounds for appeal. The first argued Chief Judge Julie Wager erred in law and fact in finding that Kelly's use of methamphetamine had a significant role in his offending. It was contended on appeal that Justice Wager made a legal error, specifically by failing to give sufficient weight to Kelly's deprived and traumatic childhood, as well as his mental impairment, when evaluating his moral culpability. This is where the Bug-Me principle was raised. Kelly's legal team argued that even more weight should have been given to these factors under the Bug-Me principle, contending that the sentence was still manifestly excessive given his background and impairment. The 3 appeal court judges, Justice Michael Buss, Justice Robert Mazza, and Justice Stephen Hall, dismissed grounds 1, 2, and 3 at the appeals court in Perth. Justice Michael Buss said in the decision, "Her Honour did not misapply any legal test applicable to the determination of whether the appellant's use of methamphetamine had a significant and causal role in the offending." The 3 judges disagreed on the 4th ground of appeal, claiming the sentence was manifestly excessive. Justice Buss found it had been clearly argued and he would have reduced Kelly's sentence to 12 years due to the mitigating factors. Justices Robert Mazza and Stephen Hall disagreed and dismissed the fourth ground. They said, "On any view, the appellant's abduction of such a young and highly vulnerable child from her parents at night and then holding her captive in his house for 18 days was extraordinarily serious. As tragic as the appellant's background is, the sad fact remains that his risk of reoffending required that the sentence imposed upon him have regard to the sentencing objective of public protection." Justices Mazza and Hall found Kelly's mental impairments and profound childhood deprivation were factors that pulled both ways, and that his methamphetamine use contributed to the offending. I'll read directly from their judgment. The sentencing judge was presented with a difficult sentencing exercise. The offending was, as mentioned, extraordinarily serious. The appellant's personal circumstances were complex. The appellant's mental impairments and profound childhood deprivation were factors which pulled both ways in the sentencing process. There were several contributors to the offending, including the appellant's voluntary use of methamphetamine. The appellant poses a well above average risk of reoffending, and, should that risk eventuate, there is a high risk he would inflict serious psychological harm on any future victim. The sentencing judge was provided with a large volume of evidence, not all of which pointed in the same direction. Her Honour carefully navigated that evidence and made appropriate findings. In essence, she concluded that the appellant had mental impairments which were a causative factor. He voluntarily used drugs at the time of the offending, and this was also a causative factor. He had a history of childhood deprivation, and he was at high risk of committing a similar offence in the future. Those findings pulled in different directions. The mental impairments and profound childhood deprivation weighed in favour of a reduced sentence. The voluntary use of drugs qualified the mitigatory effect of the mental impairments. The risk of reoffending weighed in favour of a longer sentence that adequately protected the community. In the present case, a head sentence, having regard to the requirements of Section 9AA of 20 years imprisonment or something very close to it, was entirely justified, having regard to, in particular, the statutory maximum penalty, the objective seriousness of the offence, and the need to provide an appropriate measure of public protection. The sentence imposed upon the appellant was severe, but it was an appropriate reflection of the extraordinarily serious nature of the offence the appellant committed. At Kelly's initial trial, Judge Wager told the court, "Cleo's parents described their trauma in a victim impact statement as having their lives ripped apart. The family spoke about their desperation, shock, and fear to the community via media at the time, so a little of their pain was known to others. However, the fear and distress caused to them over those 18 days was immeasurable. The child's life and that of her family has been permanently impacted, and that impact will never go away. Her parents were sad, scared, and confused. They described being too fearful to sleep, watching the same space at the blowholes each day while feeling completely empty and broken. They stayed at the place that caused them so much pain, hoping their little girl would be located. Then, when rain set in, they were told the SES search would not be conducted during the night. They were devastated by this news, fearing that if the search didn't continue at full pace, their little girl was even more at risk. They were further shattered when police put out a $1 million reward. They were gutted when the physical act of searching finally ended. It is impossible to underestimate the impact on the family. Cleo, now 7, continues to recover with support from her family and therapists. Ellie and Jake relocated within Carnarvon, focusing on rebuilding their daughter's sense of security. The community, while relieved by the resolution, remained affected by the case, with some residents advocating for increased mental health resources. Kelly, incarcerated at Casuarina Prison, was placed in a high-security unit due to public attention. His home on Tonkin Crescent was sold, and his collection of dolls was removed as evidence. The case remains a landmark in Australian criminal history, highlighting both the power of community and police collaboration and the complexities of addressing mental health in the justice system. Thanks for listening to Crime Insider's Judgements. We love hearing your feedback, so please rate and review this episode. If you have a case you want us to cover, let us know via Instagram at LiSTNR Crime or TikTok at LiSTNR Crime Team. I'll be back again next Thursday with another case. I'm Dan Mullins, with sound design by Niall Fernandez. This series was recorded and produced on Gadigal land.